Hey, Kevin. I was going to say, hey, Kevin, it's Brad. Um, these are always, I hate doing stuff like this, but I have to get better at it. The reason I wanted to give this to you was every once in a while I write these emails after a season to people, and I call it, things we think but do not say, which is if you remember from Jerry Maguire, he wrote his sort of thesis on this, which is things that we think about but we don't, but we need to talk about or say or tell people. And so this might, I could say, this might be long. It's going to be probably very messy. I've been thinking about this for a while and wanted to tell you a few things. And in many cases, it's stuff that's very uncomfortable for me. And so I tend to, as we all do, avoid the things that make us uncomfortable. But I do want to share it with you, sort of you've been very generous in sharing your struggles with me. And so a couple of things I want to talk about. One is the Hawaii race for me this year. We had reconnected this year, and I'm very, very grateful for you reaching out and sharing your journey with me. I appreciate that, initially before you sort of let everybody know, it's very personal stuff. And so I take it as a compliment that you felt comfortable enough to share with me your struggles. The Hawaii race is a very significant race for me. The half Ironman I just did in May, June, and it's the second time I've done it. And the reason it is significant for me is for things that probably most people don't know, which is in 2008 or 2009, I was sick. I started not feeling well, flu, just sort of the day-to-day stuff, and it started progressing. And maybe someday I'll bore you with the long and drawn out version of it. But it turned into I would say probably 9 of the most challenging, both physically and emotionally, months of my life. It was, people didn't know what was going on. Everyone could sort of describe it was essentially my central nervous system was behaving in a very strange way. And so all the, thousands of instructions that our brain sends to our body to do these things, in many cases it wasn't happening, or it's happening at opposite. And so my body just started not working. And one of the more challenging things was I could only sleep in 15-minute increments. And it was just, like I said, I could bore you with stories forever on how difficult it was, how painful it was, how, the best way I guess maybe I could describe it is I was never really sure what was the scarier outcome. Was that they finally said, we figured this out, and you're going to be dead in 2 months. Or, we figured this out and you're going to have to live like this the rest of your life. And so it was obviously, still here. Again, it was just a condition that everyone could talk about and no one could figure out why it was happening, and then ideally how to fix it. And I was bouncing from medical center to medical center and spent a month out in the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, I think in 2009. It was the fall. And they had thought that they had figured out what was going on, which was, an autonomic nervous system disorder that was caused by a viral infection or a head trauma, both of which I had in that window of time. And essentially that my life, was going to be forever changed. And they connected me with a specialist at UCLA. So when I came back, I would have some level of care here. And I remember in my mind, I'm thinking, gosh, they've got to be wrong. I was 40 at the time. I literally just closed out like one of the best physical years of my life from racing. I'm generally sort of a middle of the bell curve sort of guy. And, I'd gotten second place. I'd gotten podium in some races and I'd done very well. And it just seemed like, gosh, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. And met with the specialist, and she was very matter of fact of, your life is going to change, and just sort of, I know I'm all over the place with this, and again, I don't love talking about it, but one of the biggest things I struggled with was heart rate and blood pressure, which is, it would never go in tandem. I was, passing out. So, when I needed higher blood pressure, I would get low blood pressure. And then at nighttime, when I wanted low blood pressure to sleep, I would get high blood pressure. I would have, one half of my body would be like, sort of flushed and red. The other half would be sheet white. So consequently, being upright and getting proper blood flow to my brain and all the various parts of the body was a challenge. And so, she was sort of prepping me for this life that, hey, you might be in bed, and, getting up the stairs will be about as challenging as a day as you will ever get. Sort of no end in sight type of thing. And, trying to get a better understanding of my history, and asked what did I do for fun. And, I told her I was a volunteer coach for Team in Training, and I coached and I raced triathlons, and she just interrupted me right then and there, and it's like, oh yeah, that's never going to happen again. You'll never do that again. And I was just crushed. And, there's certainly obviously worse fates than that, but it just, as someone who enjoys being active, the thought of being, having to have someone take care of me, and essentially have around the clock care, and not be able to drive and not be able to do who knows what. It was very scary and very sad for me, and it was very hard. And so I just, I just sort of took it at face value and just went on with my life. And we're very, taking walks were challenging. And, as I always say, I'm sort of a stubborn idiot. And obviously you can tell from now that where the story is headed. But, I basically started with, a walk around the block, or a half hour walk around the block, and got a little bit better. And, the medication I was on was just all awful. I couldn't think really well. I was cognitively impaired. It was sort of living. It was existing, not living. And, people would just sit around and watch me. And it's just like, you just want to live and just be normal. And there was just one day I was so frustrated, so fed up. The medication just, horrible headache. I was just in pain all the time, just due to body functions and all this crazy stuff. And I remember one day I just went out, and, again, I was just not in a great headspace. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to try and run, and I don't think I fit any physical exercise for 9-10 months. And it was a hot day, and it's like, the other thing is my body, I couldn't sweat. So I consequently, my temperature was all over the place. Like on a hot day, I would overheat. On a cool day, I would just, the body just wasn't working. And so I was outside, it was hot, and I just remember thinking, oh God, I want to run. I started running, and my mindset, not a great one, was, if I stroke out or whatever, I'm miserable anyway. Let me just see what happens. And I maybe ran 10 feet, 100 feet. I don't know what it was. And I don't know. It was liberating, because it was the first time where I felt like I had any sort of say or control or anything. And I felt like garbage. My head was pounding. My skin was all flushed. But and so I just sort of took it as a, you know, I'm just going to try and do whatever I can. I'm not going to, within reason, not listen to the doctors. And so I would just take more walks and longer walks and longer walks. And then, eventually there was a coach that had reached out to me that I'd coached with in the past, and he asked me to come out to practice. And I looked awful. My lowest, I think it was down to 130 something pounds. I didn't look like the picture of fitness that people had seen me maybe 2 years prior. And so I went out to practice and had a really good time. It was great to sort of feel useful and feel productive and be around people that are super positive, and a lot of people that, have struggled with their health issues themselves, or, had loved ones that did. And so I loved it. And again, at that point, I'm pretty sure I still wasn't able to drive. And so I was getting rides places or take the bus. So I started taking the bus to swim practice, which was one of my favorite things to do. And so that year, I was more involved. I would still get very, very tired. I would go out for an evening. It would take me an hour to get there with the bus and whatnot, and an hour to get back. And it was sort of like my thing for the day. And again, felt super productive, enjoyed interacting with people. I was fairly isolated otherwise. And just really enjoyed being around the team again. Some people knew me from before, didn't understand, sort of knew what was going on, didn't know what was going on. A lot of people didn't know. There's just some guy that showed up and yelled at them at the pool. And so that rest of that year, I just did, I'd go to practice, and I think that spring I was able to drive again. And so I would just coach from the car and just sort of cheer people on, really didn't do anything. And then I would come home from practice and just, sleep for 2 or 3 days. And that's the way it went for a while. And that was the rest of probably 2010. And then I decided to come back in 2010, later that year, and coach. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go. Didn't know how active I'd still be able to be. I was still assuming that I would have to be doing a lot of the stuff from the car. And so I just kept pushing myself a little bit here, a little bit there, sometimes too much. And I was able to walk, able to start running a little bit. I'd run a block, walk a block, run a block, walk a block. And then, started on the bike just to make sure, I obviously wouldn't keel over in the middle of the bike ride. And so I just started pushing myself. And then right about that time, I'd started a new treatment, which was like this daily IV. And so I had a PICC line installed, and was hiding it from everybody. I just, again, didn't want people to know what was going on with me. And started feeling a lot better, and more confident. So it pushed myself harder. Got a little bit better. I remember going for a bike ride and thinking, "Geez, wow! I actually feel pretty good today." And so the rest of that season went gone, and then the springtime there was a race that I'd always done in the past, and I'd secretly signed up for it and didn't tell anybody. And then I ended up, doing the race. Didn't keel over. It's a challenging race because it was hot, and that was sort of a sticking point for me. And so I was able to race, and I was thrilled. And it was actually the very first race I did when I started with Team in Training. And so it was a fun little anniversary. And and then it was that time where I went up, it was in San Luis Obispo, and I came home up to see my mom, and she was living in San Rafael at the time. And I wrote an email to my team sort of explaining the significance of of why I was so elated that day, and the significance of being able to do this and me being able to do it with them. And a lot of people of them didn't know because it had been 2 years since. I should have turned the phone off. 2 years since I had been coaching prior, and so it was because I felt like I was keeping a secret from people, and it just I was nervous sending the email because I demand a lot of physical output of them, and essentially asking them to do things that I couldn't do myself, and wondering if they would see me as a proper leader or coach. And so, I'm sure, as you could probably imagine, the email went over well, and people, in fact, thought better of me only because it was something that they could understand and appreciate about me. And so that year closed out. Things were not. Everyone was like, "Oh, you back to 100%?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I'll never be back to 100%." But it was better. It was good enough. I was able to work, able to drive. I was able to exercise. I was pretty good. And then the next year, I did back-to-back coaching, and so that following year, which was 2012 season, we ended up doing Hawaii 70.3. And I hadn't done, the Olympic distance races. I'd done a couple of those. Did the Wildflower again in 2012. But the half Ironman was like in my mind. I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, that's a different beast." And so I ended up, again, same story, signing up for the race on not telling anybody, going there, and I was just going to make game day decision. And so I brought my bike, and people are like, "Oh, and we train with people when we get to Hawaii." So it wasn't totally obvious that I was going to race. And so I ended up racing that, and it was so emotional for me that day because it was something that was head and shoulders above. It's a difficult task, and it's a half Ironman and in hot conditions, which with my central nervous system was, look at me. I'm Nordic stock. I'm Irish. I don't do well in the heat to begin with, and let alone after that happened. Became harder, and so I remember being in the middle of the race, and I was on the bike, and I went over a timing mat, which is sort of keeps, it tracks where you are, and then it sends an alert, and so people can see. And I remember getting overwhelmed with emotion because I just thought, "Oh my God, I'm actually doing this. I'm actually here, doing something that I never thought I would do again." And it was, I don't know, it was a very powerful feeling, like I had been able to, someone took the steering wheel from me, and I somehow was able to wrestle it back from them. And it was just a super fantastic experience. And so this year, being able to go back and do this, and I'll bore you with part 2 of this story, which is I've had some challenges in the last several years, and here I am. I'm training for the Ironman World Championships, a dream that, since I was a kid, seeing this on TV, going, "What is that? And how do I do this?" And, I have an interesting story with Ironman, which is, 2008, before I got sick, I signed up for my first Ironman, and then I got sick. And I've had some challenges along the way that I'll talk about if you're not already asleep. But it was just like this surreal experience that I can't believe, here I am, in 2018, 10 years later from when I started getting sick, that I'm training for the Ironman World Championship. I'm back in Hawaii. I remember getting the message from you that you're in the hospital, and I can't remember if that point was when I talked about the turtle, or doing the turtle. But I felt like I was, as corny as this sounds, like you were, hang on one second, my goddaughter's calling me. like you were there with me in the sense of like, connecting with you has given me a lot of, 'cause she's very persistent, a lot of strength because I've been struggling a lot, especially this year. And so, okay, persistence is one thing, and now it's getting annoying. So, sorry about that. So Hawaii, just get back in my head in the game here. So being back in Hawaii again, sort of this mindset of, this is sort of laying the groundwork. This is my my validation slot. So I have to race this in order to validate my slot for the World Championships. And just seemingly surreal. Like, how is that possible that what happened to me, 10 years ago, and here I am today doing this. And so, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's it's very emotional on many levels. And so being back in Hawaii for the second time, and then, me being I was nervous going into that race because I was 3 months under where we normally were when we'd go to a race like that. And my confidence was low. I was, my training hadn't gone very well this spring. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And I didn't know what that was going to mean. Like, okay, if that goes poorly, how am I possibly going to do double that in the same venue, some 6 months later? And so it did go well. It wasn't great, but I did better than I'd hoped. And so it was fantastic. And so one of the things I wanted to share with you is this medal, which is, you can see that it has the shocker, it has a sea turtle on it from Hawaii. But the reason I don't love my medals, like, I do keep them, but, and some people put them out on the walls and all that sort of thing. To me, it's like a very personal thing. I'm like, yeah, okay, I did it. I know I did it, and that's the value for me. The medals I don't treasure. But the Hawaii one I do treasure because of its significance. And the significance to me is it just sort of is that amazing things happen and crazy things do come true. And that, I shouldn't be able to do this, and yet I am. And so, it's both hot in here and getting emotional. And so in your package is this medal, because I want you to have it as a reminder that crazy things happen and we don't know what's going to happen. And, I shouldn't be able to do this, and yet I am. And I don't say that as a means of, obviously I don't know what's going to happen with you. But it's just like a feeling of hope, which is we just don't know. And life can sometimes turn around. And I want you to be the steward of that medal. And you might need it for yourself. You might want to give it to somebody else to inspire them to do crazy things or do something that they don't think that it's possible. And so I would like to share it with you with that spirit. Because this is a path I feel like you and I are on together. And the other day I was running up a set of switchbacks, and there was a woman ahead of me on her bike. And I thought, okay, it was hot, wanted to walk, and I thought, oh, you know what, I'll just maybe try and catch up to her. And so I was running up the switchbacks, and I did catch up to her, and she sort of breathed this sigh of relief, sort of like, ugh, like I can't believe I'm getting passed by a runner and I'm on a bike. And she made a comment, and I said, no, it's not the way, I just was running the side, or I'm like, no, I said, I would have stopped if it was not for you. And so, it was like this concept of sort of this wheel that, it perpetuates itself, because I saw her, she inspired me. And so, and I ran up to her, and I think she was slightly deflated, but sort of inspired her. And so, I said, I'm like, look, I said, you inspire me, I inspire you. I said, this is the way this works. And then I kept going. And so that's what I feel with you, which is, you do inspire me. And like I said, I'm very appreciative of you being on this, allowing me to be on this journey with you, and sharing with me, what you're going through. And, at times I might inspire you and you inspire me. And, it's like I said, the wheel just keeps moving, moving and moving. And so, so I wanted to say that to you. Also, oh my God, this is going on way too long. But the other part is the turtle, and why it's very significant to me in many ways. I love the fact that, you and I connected on it. And as much as the story that I told you about the turtle moving forward, not backward, you might have thought it was a story for you, and it was. But it's also a story for me. I struggled with, when I got sick, and for years, thought, why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? Why did I deserve this? And I mean, as you know, there is no answer to it. Things happen, crappy things happen to good people. And, it's still, until recently, it's still stuck with me. And so, I've struggled, and say in the last 10 years, dealing with this concept. A lot of, moving backwards, a lot of looking, behind me instead of what's out in front of me. And, there's still aspects of this that my body is, obviously I'm able to do these amazing things, but, it took its toll on me, and it has consequences that rear its head, just about every minute of every day. There's a constant reminders of it. And I let it frustrate me, and, and I don't love that about me. And the other part of this is probably the harder part. And you're like, man, it's like, if this guy butchered that story, I can't wait till this part comes. And so it's a story that there was a teammate I had in 2011 and 2012, this lovely young woman. And she was new to triathlon. I think she'd done some Olympic distance, and she came to us to do her first half Ironman. And she was just an amazing person. And she was the type of person that everybody felt connected to, and everyone would think, oh, I know you know her, but she and I have something special. She was one of those people that just made everyone feel incredibly special. And so in 2011, she did a half Ironman with us. She was thrilled, loved that race. She was so excited. And then in 2012, she wanted to do a full Ironman with us. And she, just to give a little backstory, she was at the time living with her parents. Her dad's health wasn't great. And so she lived at home. She was studying to be an architect, and she was doing her series of exams. And so she was really time challenged that year. And we got in an early season race, I think in March, and she just really struggled that whole year. It was just, everything was challenging for her: time management, getting her workouts in, everything, taking care of her family. And we got to Ironman Canada, which is not an easy race. And unfortunately, the night before the race, she came running into our room, the coach's room, the hotel room, and she was in tears, and she says, I think my dad just died. And, we're trying to, get people on the phone, try and figure out what's going on. try and get her back to LA. It was very late, so we got her on a plane that next morning. She obviously missed her race, and sort of give you an idea of the kind of person that she was. Was that when she heard the news, she immediately excused herself from the team hotel and came to the coach's room, because she didn't want to. She knew everyone would be upset for her, and so she chose to remove herself so her teammates could get their rest, and so they would be able to go race. And so we got her on a plane the next morning, and to go and see her mom and take care of her mom and take care of everything. And obviously she was very disappointed that she missed her race, and so we helped her, like, say, hey, like, you've done all this work. It'd be such a shame to not fully execute on this. And so, let's do another race. Let's find another race for you. And we found Ironman Arizona. And so she signed up. We got her a charity slot for that race. And she started training. I was coaching her for that race. And it was the day of the, this is where it gets a little hard. It was the day of the Ironman World Championships, and she had an 80-mile ride. And I live in Santa Monica, and we tend to start in Santa Monica and go up the coast. And that one is, my instructions were to go 40 miles out and 40 miles back. Very long, sort of solitary ride. And she had said, well, in her very, cute way that she always tried when she was trying to change my mind. She's like, well, what if I do 2 40-mile loops? And so people could come with me and do one loop, or people come with me both loops. And so okay, that makes sense. And so we all met and went out for that first loop. And so the plan was we'd go on the ride and then go to someone's house to watch the live stream of the Ironman World Championships that day. And so I agreed to do one loop and went out, and it was one of the most spectacular days. I was feeling very good. Like, she and I had talked. She's like, how you feeling? I'm like, I'm actually feeling really good. And she had said, hey, there's an Iron, are you going to do an Ironman next year? Because she knew I still hadn't been able to do one. And there's a team was doing one, and I said, yeah, I made it. And she's like, she's like, oh, Brad, you should do it. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll do that. Maybe finally I'll do this. And so we went out and had a great ride. It was perfect weather, just gorgeous. And in the season, I may be able to spend about 5 minutes with each person and then sort of move on to the next person. So it's rare that I get this uninterrupted time with people. And so she and I just hung out for a couple hours, and we just talked about a bunch of things. And it was just really enjoyable. She's such a fantastic person. And it was just a magical day. Like, I was feeling good. The weather was beautiful. I was on a ride. I was coaching, but not, coaching 100 people. I was just helping her. And so it was just fun. Just really enjoyed riding with her, taught her sort of finally, on how to shift properly. And then I left, we came back to our first 40-mile loop, and then I went home and changed. And then she and another group of people went out on the second loop. And it was a couple hours had gone by, and it was time where she should start getting back. And so I just called, check in, seeing how timing was doing, just, call me when you get done, just so I know. And didn't hear anything back. Wasn't worried. And then all of a sudden, it's like another hour goes by. I'm like, that's weird. Start calling a few people. Hey, were you riding with her? I haven't heard anything, and thought, maybe her phone battery was gone. And so I just kept calling. I'm like, I'll go see if her car's there. And I'm sure, she just, got sidetracked or tired. It's writing emails, it can deplete you. And so I went and I saw her car, and then I got a phone call, and I heard, that there was an accident up on PCH. The traffic was stopped, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I remember like whereabouts, thinking, okay, was it closer to here? Thinking where she would be. They're like, oh no, it was it was further up. And so I thought, okay, well, it's just pretty far up there. I'm sure she's way past that. And, I was nervous, and then got a phone call from one of our teammates who coincidentally went up there because he was on the ride and he lost his car keys on the ride. And so he was trying to hunt down possibly and find out where that car key was. And he had called up and he said, hey, he's like, I want to let you know there's been a bad accident on PCH. And he said, I've asked, about, they won't tell me who it is or anything. And so I said, okay, tell the officer, this is this is the bike color, this is what she was wearing. There was a sticker underneath her top tube. I know that she always had under there from her very first race she did with us. Sorry. And he wasn't able to get any information. And then he called me back and said, I don't know anything, but I do know that there's a body bag and the person has been killed. And at that point, I remember being in my car and my heart literally skipped a beat. And it was like from concern to all out panic. And so I was just driving up PCH, and my eyes were glued on the left side of the road. All the cyclists coming in, just waiting to see her. And I started seeing people I knew, and not her. And I drove, and I just was so desperate to see her. And then I just got closer and closer, and they'd stopped the traffic. And so I just pulled over my car and ran the rest of the way up there. And I remember running up to the accident scene, and there was police that stopped. And I remember saying, I think that's my friend. And he said, can you describe her? And I, described the bike, described the clothing. And he had said, I'm so sorry to tell you that, but your friend is dead. And if there's any consolation, she died instantly. And that's all I really knew. And so I stayed up there that day, and having to start making phone calls and let team know. Horrible timing. Sorry. And having to call her sister and her best friend and tell this horrible news. And and she was up there. It was a busy day, and I think we were all up there until the nighttime. And it was just like the phone was ringing off the hook, and everyone wanted to know what was going on and what happened and how this happened. And it was horrific experience. And the reason I share this with you, there's a reason, which is, I wrestled with it. I couldn't do anything for months. And I was a wreck. And it was, me thinking 1,000 different ways of how I could possibly have contributed to her not being riding safely, something like, whatever, that I had, been a party of this. And, it's like those 1,000 what ifs, and, came to a better understanding of it after time. But, at the end of the day, it's what I feel today, which is I didn't cause the accident. It wasn't my fault, but I was responsible for her. And so it's something that I have, as you can tell, still wrestle with. And so this journey for me of doing this race this year, and then there's the craziest twists of fate. It's the exact same day. It's October 13th. She died. And this year, the Ironman Championship, World Championships are on October 13th also. And so I feel that I have not been moving forward, that I've been stuck in a lot of ways. And so the turtle, your turtle, while it might be a symbol for you, and I feel it is as well, it's a symbol for me also, which is I am desperate to move on. There's so much I want to leave out on that race course. And not to say not to think about it again, but I just got to move on with my life and let it go. My love of coaching, my love of the team, my love of the sport. I mean, Ironman World Championships used to be my favorite day of the year. And it's been, and up until 2016, I hadn't watched it. I hadn't followed it. And so this is like a journey back to try and find something. Because while Maricela died that day up on the hill, was a part of me that was left there that I've been desperate to find and move on. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate, you sharing the significance of the turtle for you. And I can now share the significance of the turtle for me, which is I want to move forward. I feel like I've moved backwards a lot. And so I thank you for reconnecting with me and for sharing your story. And so I wanted to reciprocate, even though right now you're probably thinking, is this guy done yet? So that's what I wanted to tell you. And also in the package, there's these little, some turtle stickers. I think you feel the same way. It's like, to me, it's like, it's too tiny. I want it bigger. But they tried in so many different ways to make it work and just couldn't do it. So we have it. And thank you so much. I got your message yesterday about sending that stuff to me. And it's not lost on me the significance that you're giving me the original. because I know that you feel strongly that you want your family to have originals. And so it took my breath away because I understand that the significance, or it does to me anyway. So thank you for sharing your story, including me in on what's happening to you. And thank you for inspiring me, because when I tell you, when I get stuck and I say, swim, turtle, swim, part of it's for you, and part of it's for me also. So this is the good news is if you ever can't sleep, you can turn this on and I'm sure it'll put you straight to sleep. Whew. So enjoy your package of goodies. You got a hat in there because, you and I are both hair challenged. So I thought maybe you would like a hat. And so thank you. And I'm sorry this went on way too long. All right. Be well, and hope to talk to you soon.